Welcome into another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I am Dan Myler. I am once again with Ryan McDowell and Matt Price. Week 10, pretty much in the books, guys. And it came and went. There were some major blowouts in week 10 that weren't much fun to watch. And there was even a tie that was equally as frustrating to watch. There was some good football, some big performances too. We'll get to all of that, but first we should talk to Matt. Matt, how's it going, bud?
It's pretty good. We got a win today for the Packers, and
Sure.
it was not the normal way we would think of them winning, but we got it done. So
all right.
everything's good
I like
today.
the we talk there, Matt. I can be a we because I'm an owner. I don't know. Are you an owner, Matt?
Do you own part of Lambeau?
I own stock in the Packers, so I'm an owner.
Wow. Well, I think that sounds like a really good Christmas present for me this year.
All right. Okay. How about you, Ryan? How'd Sunday treat you?
No we here, just me by myself. And it was an okay week. I kind of feel like my fantasy teams were the equivalent to that Lions Steelers game.
Okay.
That's kind of how my fantasy week went. But
well, that doesn't sound okay. That sounds pretty poor, if you ask me. Unless you had DeAndre Swift, who got like 35 touches in the game. But we're going to get to that game. We should start with Thursday night, though, guys, as we always do. It was Baltimore at Miami, and the Dolphins knocked off the Ravens 22-10. What a mess of a game. Got the week really off on the wrong foot. Brissett goes out with an injury. Tua takes over. Between them, they throw for 300 yards, but they couldn't throw a touchdown. The only touchdown for Miami was a Tua rushing touchdown, 1 yard plunge. And then for Baltimore, a lot of the same. A dump off pass to Mark Andrews over the top for a short touchdown. And that really was it. It was boring. We were all probably rooting for the Lamar touchdown at the end of the game, and he throws a pick. I don't know how many takeaways you guys had from this game. We should probably start with the Dolphins, Matt. Tua comes in. If he was healthy enough to play, why wasn't he starting? Brissett gets banged up, looks like he's ready to go back, and the coaching staff decides, nah, let's let Tua run the show for the rest of the game. I don't know what's up in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, you would think if he could have come in like that in an emergency situation that he could have started, but there was reports of his finger still not right, of questioning his grip strength, all that kind of stuff. So, maybe it was an emergency situation, but it was nice to see him come in and finish out the win there for Miami. But from a dynasty perspective, this was a guy that, certainly me and maybe you guys as well. I can't really remember, but touting him as a guy that had a chance for maybe the biggest value increase of all quarterbacks in a super flex format. I think it was like quarterback 16, 17, 18, somewhere in that range heading into the season. And now in October's Superflex ADP data, we're still working on November, I believe, but he's quarterback 20, 50th overall in the mid fifth round or so, just behind guys like Cooper Kupp, ahead of Javonte Williams, Deontay Johnson, and Daniel Jones, who was the quarterback 21 with Tua at quarterback 20. So I would definitely rather have him than Daniel Jones at this point. I think we have to remember that, his first season, his rookie season, still dealing with that catastrophic injury he suffered in college. This year he's had the cracked ribs and this finger thing. So I just feel like we haven't gotten really a chance to see a completely fully healthy Tua yet. One tool I like to look at, that a DLF that we don't talk about that much, is the quarterback comparison tool. The ADP comparison tool. It's only for one quarterback leagues right now, but it shows you a visualization of the data of this graph that'll just show you what the ADP looks like over a period of time. And Tua's is just like up and down, up and down, up and down. But between September and October's ADP collection, he had his biggest drop to date, 133 to 166, so about three rounds or so. And in the trade analyzer, his value is quarterback 16, so a little bit ahead of his ADP value. So I feel like he's kind of bottomed out in terms of his trade value. So maybe it's a time to go and try to get him. Some trades in the trade finder. Cousins for Tua in a second. I think I'll take the bonus there. I feel like Tua and Cousins are pretty close to each other. This one is kind of interesting too. Baker and Chubb for Tua and DJ Moore. So I feel like that's almost about the other players in the deal, not necessarily about the quarterbacks, because then Tua and Baker, I mean, flip a coin, I think I prefer Tua a little bit. But I think he's reasonably priced right now. And if he has reached a bottom value wise, I've seen people on Twitter this week they're just done with Tua. So if that's the case, I'm looking to buy, I think, in that late first, maybe 2 seconds kind of range.
Ryan, you were high on Tua even as late as this offseason, coming into the beginning, into week 1. What he's put on tape so far this year done to his value for you? Are you buying if you can get him at any kind of discount?
Probably not. I'm worried about the ceiling, and we haven't really seen that ceiling, which is a little concerning. Not even really in a random game here or there. Like, we just haven't seen those flashes. They added some weapons for him this offseason. That hasn't really changed. Matt mentioned the injuries as maybe a reason that it's not fair to fully judge him yet, which is true. But multiple injuries this season on top of his previous injury history are just more reasons to be concerned about him long term. So, and if we're already talking about his value in the Baker Mayfield or Daniel Jones range, that kind of says it all.
Yeah, all of it that I seen, I kept seeing names like Sam Darnold and Jameis Winston next to in these trades, Matt, and that's what I started to think is really we've dipped this low, and it made me think what you mentioned there. If it's really come this far and his value has sunk so low, maybe we should be buying. But just watching him play, I agree with Ryan. I don't see any of those ceiling type plays that make you say, wow, that's it. That's what we need. We need to bottle that up and see a little bit more of that every single week. We just haven't seen enough of it. Maybe it's the injury. I sure hope it's something like that that's holding him back and that he could get unlocked at some point. But I'm hesitant to invest anything in the Tagovailoa Express because it's not going very fast.
I mean, we have a 4-touchdown game this season. I mean, that's a spike week. So we've seen some kind of upside from him, but I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just feel like at this point, like is his value going much lower? I guess if Deshaun Watson somehow does actually end up in Miami this offseason, maybe that's a question mark. But otherwise, like I don't know. I feel like I want to buy right now.
It's going to be a fun conversation to have in the offseason. We'll see what all shakes out down there in Miami. The weapons, most of them are in place there. We expected a better season from them for sure. We'll see what happens. It'll be fun to talk about once this season wraps up. The last note from this game, guys, is probably on the Baltimore side, and it revolves once again around Rashad Bateman. 6 catches for 80 yards on 8 targets, nearly scored, broke a couple tackles on the sideline, and that was a sick grab way out in front of him with just his fingertips on that slant route early in the game. Not a lot of receivers make those catches. Those bounce off even NFL receivers' hands, and it's not the first time. 6 for 80 this week, 5 for 52 on 8 targets last week, 3 for 80 the week before. So he's starting to get rolling, it seems. He's on the field more and more, even with Sammy Watkins back this past week, Ryan. And on the field, you saw Watkins making mistakes, and Bateman was the one making plays out there. It seems like Bateman needs to be on the field more, and that's just gonna lead to more success and more dynasty managers being pumped about his upside.
Yeah, even with the hot start that Rashad Bateman had gotten off to since he returned from that injury, there was still, I think, at least a little bit of concern for the short term of what would Sammy Watkins being back in the lineup due to Bateman, due to Hollywood Brown. It really did nothing. I mean, Sammy struggled with a lack of effort on an end zone target, and I believe he either had a drop or a fumble later in the game, and then we didn't see much more from him after that. I mean, the question really with this team, specifically when it comes to the passing game, is can Lamar and can this offense support these 3 weapons, being Bateman, Brown, and Andrews? All 3 of those guys had 6 catches in this game. All 3 had at least 8 targets. Hollywood, a little bit disappointing, couple drops, which, we've got to just accept that that's kind of part of what you're getting with him at this point. So his final stat line was not necessarily what we want to see, but he did have 13 targets and finished with 6 catches. So I am feeling pretty confident that this Ravens offense can support these 3 guys moving forward.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way at this point. Bateman right now, wide receiver 32 in our most recent DLF ADP. Guys like Cortland Sutton, Tyler Lockett, Michael Thomas, and Juju Smith-Schuster, all within the 5 or 6 spots among wide receivers ahead of him. So there's a little bit of room to maybe go up throughout the end of this season and potentially start talking about him as a wide receiver 2 going into year 2. Let's jump over to the Sunday games, fellas. We're going to start with the Cowboys shellacking of the Falcons, 43-3. Dak Prescott, 296-2, added a rushing touchdown. Zeke found pay dirt twice as well. I don't know if there's a lot to talk about here. CeeDee Lamb was great, 6 for 94 and a couple of scores. Ryan, if from a Dallas perspective, you watched most of this game. What were you thinking? How like usage is really shaped up in Dallas?
It's a little hard to tell because it was such a blowout, 36-3 at halftime, I believe. So, and basically the starters didn't even play the fourth quarter. So tough to make too many assumptions, but I do think we can look at Michael Gallup being back in the lineup. And my concern was that would hurt Dalton Schultz because we have basically seen his, his breakout, his strong play coming with Gallup out of the lineup in weeks 2 through 5 or 6 or so. And those concerns were valid. Schultz gets just 2 targets, 1 catch. Gallup sees 5 targets, 3 catches. I think it's too early to guess how Michael Gallup will impact Cooper or CeeDee Lamb. They both still saw theirs, especially Lamb. But it's not good news for Dalton Schultz. I don't know that we can look at him as a weekly starter moving forward as we have over the past several weeks.
And then on the other side of things, it was a mess really for the Falcons. Matt Ryan probably scored negative points in your fantasy league this week. 2 picks, only 117 passing yards. Wayne Gallman was playing a big chunk of the snaps late in the game, and that's probably because of that Cordero Patterson injury, Ryan. I'll take the blame for that. I traded for him in 2 leagues this past week. Just 4 carries for 35 yards, 1 catch for 14, and I'm not sure. I don't think we saw him in the second half.
No, he suffered that ankle injury in the first half, and you would think if you were still kind of holding out hope for Mike Davis, that would be good news for Davis that he would see some increased work. That wasn't really the case. They went with Gallman instead. Perhaps that's because they were already down big at that point, but it's not good news for Patterson. We'll see if he's back in action over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, not a high ankle sprain. But it's also really bad news for Mike Davis. I would say at this point, we can drop Mike Davis, and Wayne Gallman might be the waiver wire target for the week.
Yeah, I was trying to get a gauge on that injury on Twitter. All those Twitter MDs that are out there, or at least claim to be MDs. Lots of fear for that high ankle sprain out there on Twitter. So we'll keep our fingers crossed there and hope for the best that we can get CPAT back on the field sooner rather than later, especially if you just invested in him like I did. How about the Colts and the Jags? Colts jumped out to a big lead, looked to be cruising. This one should have been one of those blowouts today. It didn't happen. Colts hold on 23-17. Jonathan Taylor, he was awesome in the first quarter. 21 carries, 116 yards, and a touchdown is what he finishes with. Also caught 6 passes for just 10 yards. The more I watched this game, every play that I saw this game, it went just like every Colts game, guys. I constantly was saying to myself, why aren't they just turning around and handing it to Taylor? I see 7-yard carry, 12-yard carry, and then they throw these dinks and dunks and try to get Wentz going and all those things. Wentz just 180 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. I guess he was fine. Taylor should have just carried them throughout this game, but it just didn't happen. As far as the Jaguars go, Ryan, what are your thoughts on Laviska Shenault? He had a couple of carries in this game. He caught 3 passes for just 15 yards on 8 targets. They're trying to get him involved. It's just not working.
It's got to be really frustrating if you are a Chenault believer. I know there are a lot of them out there. There have been a lot of them out there, and I think there still are. It's kind of become a joke in the Twitter fantasy football community that Jamal Agnew is what we thought Laviska Shenault would be, and that's really been the case. Agnew didn't even have a catch in this game, but did have 3 carries for 79 yards, including a 66-yard touchdown. Those are the kind of plays we thought Laviska Shenault would be making. As I said, he's that type of player for whatever reason that a lot of dynasty players kind of cling on to, and they're not letting go quite yet. And because of that, I think I would be selling Laviska Shenault before it's too late. The trade finder is pretty ugly when it comes to his value. It has certainly dropped based on that, but there's still some package deals that were taking place that I thought were pretty solid. Shenault and a first for Godwin, Shenault and a first for Hollywood Brown. Both were in there. Shenault and Christian Kirk for Calvin Ridley. Those are all deals I would make moving Shenault out of my lineup. And just looking at his weekly wide receiver finishes, 42, 107, 53, 20, wide receiver 20. That's his best game. 62, 35, 75, 57, and outside of the top 50 again this week. So just we're not seeing the upside. He led the team in targets, and it didn't even matter. He caught 3 of them for just 15 yards. He's just not making plays.
Laviska comes in at wide receiver 38 in DLF ADP, at least the most recent one. Man, it gets kind of ugly in that range. It's really fading fast. So if you're trying to pivot to another wide receiver, you're looking at guys like Terrace Marshall. If you want a little bit of that upside, goes down to like Darnell Mooney and a whole bunch of veterans like Beckham and Kenny Golladay and Tyler Boyd and Antonio Brown. So we go from the end of the wide receiver 3s, and you start those wide receiver 4s right around that wide receiver 38 mark, and there's a lot of question marks in there for sure. So really tough to pivot. Other things with these Jaguars, Matt, James Robinson came back this week, 12 carries, 57 yards, and a short touchdown, also caught for 27. What are you doing with J-Rob?
Man, I really want to buy him. I just think there's no scenario now where Travis Etienne comes back and claims the entire role, the rushing role, whatever you want to call it, the running back one.
Maybe there was never a scenario where that happened.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. I mean, maybe this is an emotional like buy target for me, because you just see that guy on the field. He's like the only one trying to will this team to victory, just carrying everybody on his back, and he looks good doing it in both phases of the game. So I speaking of Shenault, like if we could sell him for like a late first range, I think I'd be happy to do that. But what if we could, just speaking of pivots, like Robinson is somebody I'd like to buy for a late first, cheaper, obviously, if you could get it, but I think that's probably the range. So if I could just pivot from Shenault to Robinson, I might be willing to do that. But I looked up in the trade analyzer, not the trade finder, to look at some values around James Robinson, and he's just above a late first in value in the trade finder. The same with Josh Jacobs, and then just below a late first value is Miles Sanders. So I thought we could play a little quick keep, trade, drop with these 3. Dan, what do you think? Which one of these guys are you keeping, trade, or dropping?
I am keeping J-Rob, and I'm probably trading Jacobs and dropping Sanders if I have to drop somebody.
That's me too. Ryan, anything different?
No, I think I would have the same answer.
Yeah, it's an interesting group for sure. And, if we flash back in the time machine, Matt, to just a couple months ago when the season was kicking off, J-Rob, right before that injury, of course, in the preseason to ETN, his value was in the tank. And now we see him. I think all of us, he passes the eye test. We watch him and we say, wow, that guy really wants it. He's working hard out there. And one of the only ones that's doing that among all running backs, not just guys on the Jaguars. He is impressive. Let's jump over to another one of the blowouts from Sunday afternoon. It was the Patriots 45, the Browns 7. Mac Jones had his best game, just 198 yards, but 3 touchdowns, was very efficient. 19 for 23, passing, and looked in complete control of that offense. Ramondre Stevenson, another rookie, 20 carries, 100 yards, 2 scores. he looked just as good. Man, Ryan, I don't know what to say. We constantly say on this show, when it comes to the Patriots, you can't count on anything. But it really feels like whoever's getting handed the ball double-digit times in that backfield is pretty darn good. There's going to be one receiver that's pretty darn good every week. It's hard to know which one. This week it was Kendrick Bourne, 4 for 98, and an impressive leaping touchdown. What are your thoughts about these two rookies and the rest of the Patriots?
Yeah, Stevenson was great today, obviously, with Damian Harris out with that concussion. It just feels like a tease to me. I think next week we're going right back to some form of a committee. I mean, Stevenson himself has been not only in and out of a prime role, I guess we could say, but even the active lineup. He's been a healthy scratch multiple times this season, flipping roles with JJ Taylor or Brandon Bolden. So he was awesome in this game. I don't know that his value is going to spike too much based on this one performance and kind of the lead up to what we've seen from him in past games. But if I could flip him for anything of value, I would do it, because I feel like in their next game, it's right back to a committee with Damian Harris.
Matt, Damian Harris was inactive on Sunday against the Browns, so that created this opportunity for Stevenson. What are your thoughts on that backfield by committee?
I kind of agree with Ryan that he's a tease. I call him a tease plus, because I do think there's some scenario where he just is the lead back. He's kind of like the combination of all the other backs on the roster. He can catch the ball like James White or JJ Taylor. He's got the size and the ability to run through the tackles like Damian Harris does. So he's kind of the most exciting option there. But, this is always a committee. This is always a frustrating situation from him. I just can't, like, seeing him on the field today, he reminded me, it was like shades of Corey Dillon in a Patriots uniform. Not that they're the same player, but they are about the same size, both height and weight wise. I don't know. I think I'm a little bit more optimistic than Ryan is, but he's probably right, and that this is just going to go back to being you have no idea which one you're going to start. I will say in redraft, Ramondre Stevenson is somebody that I've picked up and dropped off of the same roster like 4 or 5 times this season. I picked him up like this morning right before kickoff, and then didn't put him in the lineup. So I didn't pay off for me there either, and I'm sure I'll put him in next week and he'll be a dud. So
yeah, it feels like to me like Bill, good old Uncle Bill. He likes to leave one of them running backs off the roster and like rest him for a week. So the next week he's got a guy that's 100% healthy, ready to roll in case he needs him. And Ramondre is that guy. Every other week he's gonna roll him out if he needs him. If he doesn't, he's gonna let him sit and stay healthy for the following week in case he does. And I guess you can do that in the NFL with the way practice squads are and the way inactives go. It's not really a bad thing to do from an NFL perspective. But for fantasy managers, it is absolutely maddening. Baker Mayfield, guys, he got banged up in this one, injured knee. There was a little bit of good news on social media throughout the late afternoon, but we'll see how that plays out. Certainly, if you're a Browns fan, you need Mayfield back, because Case Keenum did not look like the answer. Dearness Johnson, he is, though. 19 carries, 99 yards, 7 catches for 58. He was the free square on the bingo card. If you had him on your roster, easy to slide into your lineup, because there was nobody else. Nobody else got a carry out of that backfield except for, I think it was a fullback, a lunge forward Johnny Stanton got. So it was weird. Hunter Henry also, guys, another game. 2 touchdowns. Jeez, that guy. 4 catches, 37 yards. Jacoby Myers finds the end zone for the first time, so we don't have to hear about that anymore. The Bills blasted the Jets 45-17. Josh Allen threw for 366 and a couple scores, also threw a pick. And Ryan, finally, Stephon Diggs, 8 catches, 162 yards and a touchdown on 13 targets. That's the game we've been waiting for from Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, I think it was last week I said to pivot off of Stephon Diggs, it would be it would continue to be these frustrating games, and here he pops up with a good one. The Jets are a get right spot. Diggs with a big game. The combined backfield, a big game from them, but it wasn't just Moss, it wasn't just Singletary. It was both of those guys and Matt Breida as well, who had been not even active most weeks this season, and Breida scores twice to kind of frustrate anyone who had relied on Singletary or Moss. That I don't think we're not looking at either of those guys as long-term valuable assets. And even from a week-to-week basis, it's a little iffy. You never know which one of those is going to play the lead role. But now, if it's a three-way committee and this Breda thing is real moving forward, we can't use any of them.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like you don't feel real good clicking the checkbox next to any of those guys' names. Breda, Singletary, and Moss. They all had the rushing touchdown. Breda also had the receiving touchdown, as you mentioned there. Going back to Diggs, Matt, what are your thoughts here? Because the 8 catches, 162, and a touchdown, that was commonplace a year ago with Allen throwing it all over the place. And they're few and far between this season. So what's the move if you got Diggs on your roster?
Maybe this is an opportunity to sell if if you've been relying on him this whole season. Maybe you're not quite contending. Maybe you're right on the bubble and are considering going the other direction right now. And if that's the case, he's a 28-year-old receiver. We know what happens to the value of those guys after this. We've seen the trajectory with guys like Julio Jones, even DeAndre Hopkins. It doesn't matter how good they are; the value is on the decline. And I thought maybe you'd be able to pull 2 firsts still for Diggs, but looking at the trade finder right now, it really does not seem like that's the case. 23 first and Uzoma for Diggs. Diggs straight up for Javonte Williams, straight up for Chris Godwin, straight up for Derrick Henry. So maybe it's the other way. Maybe it's an opportunity to buy if somebody wants to sell off of this game. I'm not really sure. I'm probably not buying. I don't have any shares of Diggs. But maybe it's time to buy if you are a contender.
I tried to sell last week, trying to listen to what Ryan had to say about trying to pivot to another player. And I didn't like the counters I got back. They weren't. I decided finally that I needed to hope for these games, hope for a resurgence, and maybe he could get closer to that 2 first range. I don't know if we're ever going to get back there with, like you said, a soon-to-be 28-year-old receiver. May have already seen the height of his dynasty value. Gabriel Davis made an appearance, I guess. 3 catches, goes over 100 yards, just the 3 targets. I've been waiting all year, hoping some of those Emmanuel Sanders targets would end up going to Gabe Davis. That happened a little bit, I guess, but it was against that Jets defense. For the Jets, not a lot to write home to mom about there. Mike White threw 4 picks. Michael Carter got in the end zone. Corey Davis caught 3 for 40 or 5 for 93. And Elijah Moore, 3 for 44 and the touchdown. The tie, let's talk about it. The Lions and Steelers both ended up with 16 points. DeAndre Swift, 33 carries, 130 yards, also caught 3 passes. And Najee Harris, 26 carries, 105 yards, and 4 for 28 through the air. So outside of the 2 young running backs, I don't know if there's a lot to talk about. We could probably talk about Deontay Johnson. Let's start with you, Matt. What do you think? What do you think about Swift, what he did on Sunday against the Steelers?
I have 2 thoughts about it. No real hot take in terms of what to do with him in terms of, buying or selling or any of that stuff. But I do wonder if this is a rushing share anomaly for him. It was nice to see him get that volume, which we have not seen at any point in his career so far. His previous high on the ground was 16 carries in week 9 of 2020. His previous high from this season was 14 in week 3, and now he's got 33 this week, doubling his previous high. I can't imagine we see that except for in games where Jamal Williams is missing time, and he's got a thigh injury, I believe, soft tissue injury, so he shouldn't be out for too long. So I don't really have a strong take here either way. It just seems like this is something that's probably not going to repeat itself. So I think there's a lot of talk this week about him being the running back 2 overall in Dynasty. I'm not sure I'm there yet. I think Ryan, you talked about on your other podcast, Locked On, this past week. So just commentary for me. I don't have a hot take here. I just wonder if this is a high point for him in terms of workload on the ground.
Well, that's a massive workload for sure. 33 carries. What was interesting to me when I watching this game, he gets a couple carries and a catch, runs off the field, and then Godwin Igwebuike comes in and a wide open hole. He busts it off for 42-yard touchdown. Before that, same kind of thing. A couple carries for Swift, runs off the field. Just Jermar Jefferson comes on. Thank you, Ryan. And big 28-yard touchdown. So if he had those 35 carries, it would have been like 216 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
those two other backup running backs combined for 5 carries. Swift was the entire offense. That's clearly not what they're trying to do.
Well,
I did think partway through this game, though, Ryan, that maybe the workload was because this coaching staff saw an opportunity to potentially win a game, which they need so desperately, and decided we need to get our best player the football as much as possible. There were so many 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, and they'd run a draw or a quick screen to Swift to get him the ball because nobody else on that team can make a play.
yeah, I do think that's a lot of what happened. We did see the rookie Jamar Jefferson make an impact early. He only played 3 snaps, but he carried the ball on all 3 snaps, including that 28-yard touchdown run. But then he suffered an ankle injury and was done for the day. Actually got carted off, I believe. So maybe
I missed that.
Maybe some concern for a long-term injury there. I'm not sure how severe that is. But with Jefferson out, obviously Jamal Williams was inactive for this game, as Matt mentioned. That left Igwebuike and Swift as the only running backs. So, yeah, they had to lean on Swift. They certainly didn't lean on TJ Hawkinson. He got 1 target and didn't catch it. That was frustrating.
Yeah, so if you watch Thursday Night Football and you were all up in arms over your tight end one not getting a catch on 7 targets, you got to be doing the same thing with TJ Hawkinson this week. That was ridiculous. Only 1 target, not a big part of the offense. And Gesicki, he was regularly targeted on Thursday night and couldn't catch anything. It was disgusting to see Hawkinson's stat line. For Pittsburgh, of course, Mason Rudolph was under center, 242 and a touchdown. I guess he was fine. Deontay Johnson, 7 catches for 83 yards on 13 targets, Ryan. What are your thoughts on Deontay at the midway point of the season?
Yeah, that's the Deontay Johnson stat line. That's what we see. Double-digit targets every game. Something like this, 7 for 80. A good productive game. Between 12 and 16 points is pretty much what he's going to get you. We've seen his value really rise. You guys have mentioned the November ADP a couple times. Not out on the site yet, but getting close to done, almost ready to post. Deontay Johnson is an early 3rd round pick in that ADP. Ooh. By far his highest ADP ever. He's the wide receiver 13. Just a few names that are being drafted behind him. Joe Mixon, Chris Godwin, T. Higgins, Derrick Henry. Obviously, that is post-injury. Calvin Ridley, that's taking his situation into account as well. J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper. I mean, that's almost the entire 3rd round. If that's a good representation of where Deontay Johnson is being valued, then I think he's a sell right now. He's got a great floor. He's been a double-digit scorer in every single game this year. You know he's going to get you, like I said, 12 or 15 points. He only has 1 game this year as a top 15 wide receiver, though. So that's it. It's a great floor, but not the ceiling. So
rich man's Keenan Allen, Jarvis Landry type. Feels like.
Yeah, it feels that way. And
very rich.
Looking into the future, the future is relatively bleak, right? We're so many questions about who's going to be around him, the quarterback position, of course, the other wide receivers on the team. Is everything going to stay the same and offer that same kind of stability to Deontay Johnson, who has moved so high in that ADP? The move I like to make is, because everybody's always looking for that kind of consistency, go find one of those other receivers, the young guys, the Devontae Smiths, the Jalen Waddles, the Jerry Judys of the world, and get a relatively significant piece on top that can help you out in the long term. Whether you're contending or not, I think that's something worth looking into. I love Deontay, but it is so maddening to see bubble screen after bubble screen. He gets a couple downfield targets a game too, but it feels like all his work is within about 7 yards of the line of scrimmage. And, that's fine for a Hunter Renfrow type player. But when you're talking about a guy in the top 3 rounds of ADP, as you indicated there, Ryan, that's not exactly what we're looking for. Let's jump over to the Titans and the Saints. Tennessee outlasts New Orleans 23-21 behind Ryan Tannehill, 213 yards and a touchdown. Also had a rushing touchdown. So, if you see that Tannehill has a nice game, you probably expect A.J. Brown to have a pretty good game as well, especially with Julio on IR. A.J. Brown just 1 catch on 4 targets for 16 yards, Matt.
Yeah, just maddening. I was wondering how this was going to work out with Henry missing time. Were they going to focus more on the passing game? Was that going to expose, AJ Brown to even more coverage? And he did draw Marcus Lattimore today, which is, he's been shutting down receivers all season long. So, maybe it's just another kind of down point in his season. My concern is the consistency this year. He has 3 games in week 6 to 8 that we really would call usable. I guess week 1 he had an okay game because he got that touchdown late, but otherwise it's been just just like a roller coaster starting him every week. He's entering this week he was wide receiver 28 overall, from a points per game standpoint, wide receiver 26, and he's 5 points per game lower than the other 2 Browns that we talk about in fantasy, both Antonio Brown and Hollywood Brown, who are wide receiver 5 and 6 in points per game, and that's not where we have him in Dynasty. He's widely considered a top 5 wide receiver by most. I think I do have him at 5 or 6 right now, but some have him as high as wide receiver 1, and I just wonder if that's a ranking we should be placing on a guy like AJ Brown right now.
He's such a freak. When he's going,
he's great.
He's fun to watch. He's like DK Metcalf, or these kind of guys. They're going to have these down games, and I think we got to just live through them. You sell a guy like AJ Brown, you're most likely going to be regretting it down the road. I just love his talent for sure. The lead receiver for Tennessee on Sunday was Marcus Johnson. Yep, that Marcus Johnson, 5 catches, 100 yards on 6 targets. We're probably picking him up in dynasty leagues, especially deep ones. But we've seen Nick Westbrook-Akina, we've seen Chester Rogers kind of roll through that offense and be the lead guy for a week or two, and it hasn't really panned out. It might just be his chance there with Johnson this week. On the other side of things, Ryan, Deontay Harris, 3 catches, 84 yards on 4 targets. Once again, catches a deep ball. What are our thoughts there?
I think I've seen enough consistency from Harris to add him to rosters if he's still out on waiver wires. This is 5 games in a row now where he's either had 7 targets or 70 receiving yards. So getting a little bit of volume, a little bit of production, not necessarily ceiling production. He's not giving you 10 for 150 or anything like that. But if you need that bye week guy, he's there for you. Wide receiver 3 or better in 3 of the last 4 games. I think he'll be in that range this week as well once all the games wrap up.
Yeah, I mentioned his stat line: 3 for 84. Marquez Callaway, 2 for 37 and a score. Traquan Smith, 4 for 44 and a score. Mark Ingram, guys, without Kamara active, 14 carries, 47 yards and a score, but caught 4 for 61. So he was a nice bye week or injury fill-in for us dynasty managers. One of the surprises of Sunday came in Washington. The football team come out on top against the Bucs, 29-19. And Ryan, Antonio Gibson, it happened. He didn't average what we wanted him to average or anything, but 2 touchdowns, we'll take that. 24 carries for 64 yards, 2 catches for 14. At least he had one of these games where we feel good about putting him in our lineups.
Yeah, I'm glad we always point out that yards per carry is not a great stat to use because it didn't look good.
It doesn't look good.
But beyond that, like you said, the 2 touchdowns and if nothing else, he just looked healthy. The 24 carries is a new career high for Gibson. So the team and the coaching staff obviously felt he was healthy. And this is really what we've been talking about for 6 weeks. It's felt like get to this bye, get this guy some rest, hopefully get him healthy. And he did look fully healthy. So hopefully he'll continue to see an uptick in work in the passing game. I believe he only had 2 targets in this game, caught them both. McKissick's still seeing a bigger opportunity there when it comes to targets and routes run, things like that. So if Gibson can get that in his corner, then we're really talking.
Yeah, J.D. McKissick, 28 snaps, 18 routes run, and 4 targets. Jarrett Patterson was also on the field for 5 snaps and took away 4 carries. So it seems like there's been a bit of a transition there, that if maybe Gibson wasn't on the field, maybe Patterson would get more of those carries. McKissick had only 1 in this game. Matt, we got some other news late last week or into the weekend, I guess, that Ryan Fitzpatrick is probably not going to be back this season. What does that do for Taylor Heineke in Superflex leagues?
Well, I just wonder if he's going to be starting beyond this year. I do think they'll probably try to bring in some competition next season, but we've now heard that Ryan Fitzpatrick will not return for this season. He is an unrestricted free agent. If you look at the unrestricted free agent list, or it's not super attractive out there either. So I just wonder if it's worth trying to invest a small amount into him, if someone's willing to move him for like a second, maybe a second and third in Superflex. I'm probably not willing to invest a first in him at this point. But some attractive deals in the trade finder, Heineke and Debo for Zach Wilson. If you're ready to jump off the Zach Wilson train and pick up a wide receiver, that's sort of interesting to me. He's also gone for a single third round pick multiple times, a single second round pick multiple times. So I think right around in that range, I'm willing to invest just in the off chance that he does become a starter for more than this season.
You meant for sure not giving up a first-round pick, not probably, right?
I'm not giving up a first-round pick.
Yeah, okay. You said the word probably with a little bit of hesitation.
I mean, if we get some declaration that he's gonna, be a long-term starter for the team, maybe at that point. But
okay, Matt, you fill in the blank. Taylor Heineke has a blank % chance of being the starting quarterback for Washington next season.
Give it a 50-50 chance.
Oh, I would say 12%.
12%. I just don't. They're not gonna if they keep winning games. I know they're only 3-6 now, but if they keep winning games, they're not going to be high enough in the draft order to take one of the top quarterbacks. And again, I'm not really up to speed on college quarterbacks right now, but from what I understand, they've been disappointing so far from a dynasty standpoint. So I don't know. I mean, where are they going to get another quarterback? I guess at this point, are they going to is Cam going to go back on the market? Are they going to bring him in? Are they going to trade for Deshaun Watson? Are they going to sign Ben Roethlisberger? Is Aaron Rodgers going to go there?
All those seem just as likely as Heineke being their starter next season.
I think he's
really feels that way to me.
I feel like he's played pretty well this season considering everything, but maybe I'm in the minority there.
I really like playing against dynasty teams that start Taylor Heineke. I know. For the Buccaneers, Tom Brady threw a couple early picks, threw a couple late touchdowns though as well. Leonard Fournette, 11 for 47, wasn't a big part of the game plan rushing wise, but caught 8 passes for 45 yards. They didn't really mix much in late in this game. It was Fournette catching those dump offs when the Bucs were trying to catch up. Mike Evans was a massive disappointment to those who like Mike Evans. 2 catches, 62 yards, and a touchdown. If he didn't get that long, wide open touchdown, man, he looked awful all day. I really dislike that guy. Chris Godwin, 7 for 57 on 8 targets. Let's jump over to Carolina and Arizona. Another butt kicking, guys. Panthers 34, Cardinals 10. It was all Christian McCaffrey all the time. Matt, 13 carries, 95 yards, and 10 catches for 66 on 10 targets. I wanted him to get that touchdown on the pylon so bad.
Seriously,
he was out of bounds. He needed that one.
He did. I mean, but he's. I wrote in the notes. He's still a cheat code. I mean, he's a running back 1 and a wide receiver 2 wrapped up in one. And I know we've pushed him down the rankings a little bit because of injuries, and it's certainly concerned. He was in the medical tent again today, I think with a hamstring or something. But he did come back into the game, so that's always going to be a concern with him going forward. But I don't know. For me, he's still the running back 2. I'm willing to annoy Jonathan Taylor, the running back 1 in Dynasty. I think that's pretty obvious at this point, given what he's done over the last 6 weeks or so. But man, that upside from McCaffrey, and even we've talked about this before, even when his value falls off, when he's not a valuable dynasty asset in terms of on the trade market or anything, and he's lost a little bit between the tackles, as long as he's on the field, he's going to be a weapon as a receiver, I think, even as he gets into the later part of his 20s here. So even if you're not competing, maybe I don't think I would be selling just to get out of a running back at this point. I think he's going to be a useful piece for many years to come. obviously as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, he only 25 years old. Man, just you said it perfectly. Cheat code. That was a vintage Christian McCaffrey game there against Arizona, and that's a formidable defense. That's a defense we look at as one of the better ones in the NFC for sure. The other headline out of this game, Ryan, has to be Cam Newton. Signs on Thursday, scores on Sunday, throws a touchdown, and just announces to everybody that he's back.
Yeah, he was
literally
exactly. He was quick to pull that helmet off after that rushing score, and it was easy to read the lips. I'm back. I'm back. So yeah, I mean, whatever you think about Cam Newton, he's a fun player to watch, and I mean, this Carolina Panthers team needed him. They bring him in on that first red zone opportunity. He gets the rushing touchdown, comes back in after an Arizona turnover, and throws the touchdown to Robbie Anderson. At that point, yeah, I know this sleeper. You hadn't done much this year, but got to keep an eye on. But I honestly thought they would just go to Cam at that point, but
I did too.
The way the Cardinals were struggling, couldn't hang on to the ball. They didn't really have to. We saw a few more plays from Cam Newton, and I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that we'll see him moving forward in that starting role. So the great news for him. Matt talked about Christian McCaffrey. It was great to see him back at full strength as well, but probably not great for DJ Moore, because when Christian McCaffrey's on the field, DJ Moore does not, he just doesn't have that ceiling. They do too many of the same things in his career. When McCaffrey is playing, Moore averages 2 fewer fantasy points per game versus when McCaffrey's been out of the lineup. And in this one, just 4 catches, 24 yards, just kind of another ho-hum game. We saw the ceiling early this year, but the past month or so, it's been pretty rough for DJ Moore.
It's a little disappointing too, because I think he's proven himself as somebody who can play well on the outside as a downfield receiver. So I don't know why they don't just pivot and use him that way. It's clear he can do anything on the field that a wide receiver can do.
Yeah, he still got the targets, 7 targets, ran the routes, ran 33, led the team there, and was on the field for more snaps than any other receiver. In fact, any other non-quarterback among the skill players. So it's frustrating for sure as really I think all of us are really DJ Moore truthers. We love his skill set, love what he brings to the table, both for your dynasty team as well as for the Panthers. But man, it's just frustrating that he can't get it to work out when CMC is on the field. For the Cardinals, not a lot of highlights there. 10 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown for James Conner, so he keeps the streak alive. Christian Kirk led the receivers, 7 for 58. Before we jump into the late games from Sunday, let's mention our friends over at Monkey Knife Fight, daily fantasy sports for the rest of us. Even if you've played DFS in the past, your experience with Monkey Knife Fight is going to be completely different. No more competing against professional players or working through time-consuming salary caps. With Monkey Knife Fight, you choose from unique, easy-to-play games, including the popular More or Less contests, where you can bet on if your favorite NFL player will have more or less yards than predicted. You can also play all the other major sports as well as golf, UFC, NASCAR, and more. Sign up for a new account with Monkey Knife Fight with a first-time deposit and receive a full year of DLF premium for free. In addition, Monkey Knife Fight will match the deposit total up to $100 with the promo code DLF. That's it. It's all you have to do. Your DLF subscription is going to be set up within 36 hours. You'll have access to everything DLF has to offer. So go log on to dynastyleaguefootball.com, click the image for Monkey Knife Fight, and follow the instructions to get started today. Let's get started with the Vikings and the Chargers. Vikings win 27-20. Dalvin Cook was great, 24 for 94 and a score, also caught 3 for 24. And then Justin Jefferson had one of them big games that Justin Jefferson does, 9 for 143 on 11 targets, but didn't find pay dirt. For the Chargers, Ryan, Keenan Allen, he's the guy there in Los Angeles, 8 catches, 98 yards on 11 targets. He's Justin Herbert's favorite target once again.
Yeah, it didn't start out that way this season, as we saw Mike Williams really take off. The first 5 weeks of the season, Mike Williams was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy. Weeks 6 through 9. This is not counting this week. Don't have those numbers in there full yet. But from week 6 through 9 entering this week, wide receiver 88. So those are some pretty rough splits. Obviously, Williams didn't do much to help himself here, but Keenan Allen certainly did with the stat line. He put up 11 targets, 8 grabs, and 98 yards, as you said. So, Allen's back to that weekly starter status that he has been basically his entire career, and Mike Williams is right back to where he's been, kind of on the borderline, being a spot fantasy starter, not a guy that you're going to lock into your lineup. And that's of course changed since what we saw the first month of the season.
The other guy for the Chargers that was a lock in our lineups, Austin Eckler, 11 carries for 44 yards and caught 3 for 15. Found pay dirt on one of those grabs, so he came through for all of us as well. The Eagles beat the Broncos. It was an entertaining game, I would say, guys. But the Eagles pull away at the end, 30-13. Devonta Smith, 4 catches, 66 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts was pretty good as well, 178 and 2. Ran for 53. So the Eagles look better. The Broncos look worse. All that wrapped up. And all we can really talk about is Dallas Goedert left with an injury. And the Eagles suddenly, Ryan, have a running game.
Yeah, it's crazy. We saw this in week 8, I believe, which was Miles Sanders' first game out of the lineup. And we saw Jordan Howard and Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell all have some success, and kind of joked that we would want to see the same for Sanders when he gets back on the field. And it's not really a joke anymore. Now we've got 3 weeks of evidence here, and I'm trying to decide if this is good news for Sanders when he gets back on the field, or if he's in the process of losing his job. The first 7 games of the season, the Eagles running backs averaged 13.8 carries for 65.1 yards. That's obviously Sanders. That was kind of before Howard really saw much work. It was mainly Sanders and Gainwell. So 14 carries, 65 yards. In the past 3 games when Sanders has been out, they've averaged 30 carries for 142 rushing yards. We talked about Sanders a little bit earlier, that we all chose to drop him in that scenario Matt presented. And there's reason why. When he's healthy, I think Jordan Howard, at the very least, is going to have a significant role still.
It certainly feels that way, but if you go back through the eye test, watching these 2 players play over the last handful of season, Miles Sanders absolutely passes it. He looks like the real deal, and Jordan Howard regularly does not. That hasn't been the case recently. Howard is running fearlessly, especially between the tackles, a lot like early in his career with the Bears. Looks like a different kind of tailback. Once again, certainly earned that spot on the Philadelphia roster. 12 carries, 83 yards. Boston Scott added 11 carries for 81. That backfield, it's going to be something to watch down the stretch. Javonte Williams for the Broncos, 8 carries, 48 yards, caught 2 passes. Melvin Gordon, 9 carries, 44 yards, and a touchdown, caught 1. Tell me if you've heard this before. Oh my goodness. They can't decide to just go to Javonte. They need to, but they won't. Let's jump over to the final game that we need to talk about here, guys. It was the Packers shutting out the Seahawks 17-0. And it was AJ Dillon, guys. I know it happened because of the Aaron Jones injury, and Jones, I guess, was all right. 25 yards rushing, 4 for 61 catching the football. But AJ Dillon, 21 carries for just 66 yards, plunged it in a couple of times, 2 catches for 62 yards, had multiple impact plays in the game. And now, depending on what we hear from this Aaron Jones injury, and I know early speculation is that it's a sprain and all those things, we'll see how that shakes out. Most likely, Jones is going to miss some time. So I'm wondering, Ryan, if AJ Dillon has the upside to be a league winner in 2021.
I think he absolutely does, and I think you were being a little too kind to Aaron Jones, because even before that injury, he was getting outplayed. I thought, at least, by A.J. Dillon. I know you guys both obviously watched this game really closely, but even at the time of injury, Dillon already had double-digit carries, while Jones finishes with 7. Jones was seeing more targets and finished with more targets and catches than Dillon, but he also had a bad drop. And I don't know. It's just not the same player. We've been talking about it for a while. I saw someone mention it on Twitter that Dillon is the new Jones. Jones is the new Jamal Williams. I don't know if I would go quite that far yet, but it's been, like I said, trending in a bad direction for Aaron Jones and his fantasy managers.
Matt, what did you think of this backfield? Because every time I saw A.J. Dillon carrying defenders for a few more yards, I'm thinking to myself, these are the carries that Aaron Jones has been getting all season, and he's getting tripped up in the backfield and making a 1-yard run into a 2 or 3 yard run, and Dillon's making 1-yard runs into a 4 or 5 or a 6-yard run from time to time. That catch and run down the sideline, the Seahawks defense was gassed, but that was pretty impressive for a big guy like him.
Yeah, and that goal line touchdown where he just basically ran right through Bobby Wagner, who is no slouch at defending the run. So, absolutely impressive. You know, I don't know. I'm not really ready to say he's the running back one for the Packers. If Aaron Jones is out, then he certainly is, but he's going to be involved more and more down the stretch, especially as we get into these cold weather months. I mean, this is what Matt LaFleur has wanted. He's wanted this grinder type running back, and he's got that. And obviously he offers even a little bit more upside than that. I think we've seen that today in the passing game. So I'm definitely optimistic about Dillon. I'm not ready to throw Jones in the trash. I don't think you can sell him at this point. I feel like you have to hold him unless you're just, if you want to like get out for like a late first or something like that, maybe that's an option for you if you're just done with him. But I think I would probably be holding at that price. I'm not going to get the value that I want to get out of Jones right now. My only other comment on this game, and it's not really one, he's probably not on any roster in any league, but Patrick Taylor, he profiles more as he's the only other running back on the roster right now. I think he's maybe on the practice squad. I'm not sure if he's on the active roster, but he profiles more as like a Dillon replacement, a bigger body guy, 6 foot, 220-ish pounds, kind of just like a big lumbering back, not nearly the upside obviously as Dillon does, but might be worth picking up off the waiver wire this week if Jones is actually out for any foreseeable future.
Yeah, Taylor got a couple of carries late in that game, 2 carries for 7 yards. The only other guy that was called up, at least. We'll see how it shakes out with the Jones injury. I'm really hoping that it's more of a sprain and it's a short-term injury. But honestly, getting to see Dillon have the workload for the next couple of weeks, that seems appealing. I wonder if that can turn into a play-action game, help Devontae, help those other receivers as well. We'll see if Dillon can carry the load for the Packers. For the Seahawks, guys, Russell Wilson came back from the finger injury and looked pretty rusty. 161 and threw the couple of picks. Probably should have thrown a couple of more. Threw some balls up for grabs. Didn't look sharp on a couple of those inside routes across the middle that he's so often run out of trouble in the pocket and found a receiver on a second chance opportunity. He was doing that. He just missed them from time to time in this game. He made a couple good throws as well. So the sky isn't falling, but he doesn't look like himself. Alex Collins, 10 for 41. And DK Metcalf actually got thrown out of this game. 3 catches for 26 yards on 8 targets. It was late that he got thrown out, and then he tried to sneak back in. That was humorous for sure. So I guess that does it for this week's episode of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan. That's Ryan. Over there is Matt. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you again next week.